The battle of wizards and warriors continues with iron swords. The evil wizard Malkill will take the shape of the earth, wind, water, and fire. Farewell! The fate of the world is in your hands!
You're listening to the Piercing Wizard podcast, and I'm your host, Ryan Willett. I'm a professional body piercer with 20 years experience. I travel around the world teaching technique and safety classes, and I'm a member of the Association of Professional Piercers. Listen in as I talk to my friends and colleagues about our industry so we can all stay sharp. Welcome back to another Piercing Wizard podcast, episode 253. And Lola came up with an interesting format to kick the can down the road. And we're going to basically, we have a prepared list of questions for one another with some rules. So do you want to talk about the rules at all?
So we're going to be blind interviewing each other. I've prepared some questions for Ryan. Ryan's prepared some questions for me, and we don't know what they are. So we're going to be hearing them for the first time. Each of us has 7 questions, and we're also giving ourselves 2 vetoes, 2 skips if there's 2 questions that we can or don't want to answer. And Ryan has also requested that we have one Uno reverse card where the other person has to answer the question.
We are just about to leave for the UK APP conference in Nottingham. So if you're going to be there, keep in mind that we're going to have a table at the For Piercers by Piercers table in the expo. I don't really know how to articulate it better than that. I think we have a 1 or a 2 hour window with a booth, and I'll have a few pins with me. I'll have a few hats and maybe a few t-shirts also. So if you wanted to get any of those, keep your eye out for the schedule for the For Piercers by Piercers table at UK APP.
So that's a table where the vendors are going to be changing all through the long weekend.
Yeah, and it's mostly the different like volunteer people, instructors, things like that. I also have a new video available on Patreon. I've got a video showcasing 2 different variations of navel piercings. One has that more forward-facing kind of placement, and one has that more forward-leaning, floating style placement. So I talk about the differences and why I selected one over the other. I show how to mark. I show my methods for jewelry selection and piercing. So if you're interested in that, you can check it out now at patreon.com/RyanPBA. And the next video that I'll be working on the trip to Nottingham and then carrying on to Poland will be inner and outer labia piercings. So navel's just published. Inner and outer labia should publish sometime in late September 2024. So why don't you do the first question?
Okay. Question the first. And these aren't in any particular order. Like I haven't done them in like a first to last kind of thing. Okay. What is your least favorite piece of jewelry that you see in a particular piercing? Like, and this is a completely stylistic, personal preference thing. It's not a professional judgment. It's just, is there a style of jewelry that you're just like, I hate it. I hate it. And that you just don't enjoy? Do you have one of them?
I just want to clarify the scope of the question. Are you talking about jewelry that I might be asked to install in someone, or are you just talking about all jewelry?
Just in general, like all jewelry, all piercings, is there a particular jewelry piercing combination that you're just like, I chuck it in the bin, I don't like it? Like, no offense to people that have it, but stylistically, I just hate it. Do you have one of
Acrylic balls. Acrylic balls. Like I know I could come up with something that's like edgier or whatever, something that's more modern and in the piercing zeitgeist or whatever, but my career is long arching, as you have subtly mentioned several times, and I have always despised acrylic ball ends, and not just from like the jewelry quality snob in me, but just like the tackiness factor. Like when people wore those acrylic balls that were like white and blue stripes, or the ones that said like kiss me or whatever stuff on it. I hated those, especially on a piercing that was visible, like an eyebrow or sometimes even a tongue, because when people wear that kind of jewelry, they're really prone to just sticking it out so that everybody has to see it.
What about the little spiky acrylic, like I don't even know if it's acrylic, but the ones with the little gel spikes on them.
They
Did you
were
ever
like
get?
rubber, some kind of rubber, and like the tough part is that I used to have all that shit
Mhm.
in my shop, all of it. Like I used to buy jewelry packs out of the back of tattoo magazines, and it would be like 100 pieces of jewelry for $150, and I'd be like, "Great, sounds awesome." I did that loads of times in the 90s. All right, did that sufficiently answer that question?
I guess.
Okay.
Like, I think I was thinking more specific, but I think that that's specific enough. Like,
If I have to be hyper specific, it's specifically the people that wear that jewelry in their tongue and constantly stick their tongue out and play with their jewelry so that everybody else is forced to see it. That's my number
and
one piercer jewelry pet peeve.
and do you think part of it as well is that so many acrylic tongue bars like break or wear down over time? So they also have that thing where like, where people have the
The bottom
plastic
ball is covered in
glue
plaque.
on or like the plastic like glue on thing that's like worn off over time, so it's just an empty pocket.
Yeah, I mean that would bug me, but not as much as just the people that choose that jewelry for a
Yeah.
stylistic reason.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
What is the silliest aftercare idea you have ever heard someone recommend or use?
So do you mean like aftercare I've heard like a piercer give
Yeah,
or
not
after
not
a
hypothetical
client?
aftercare. Like, let's say that, you were in a forum and someone was like, you should do this with piercings. Not like a hyper specific troubleshooting scenario, like just the day-to-day aftercare of like, oh yeah, you should put this on all your piercings.
I think that I might pass this one because I don't hear crazy aftercare. Like I've heard, like people recommend that someone makes their own sea salt solution and stuff, but I don't have a big list of like really bonkers aftercare instructions that I can think of that's come to mind. I mean, it's all pretty generic stuff. Um,
Today, yeah.
like,
I
I
think
mean, I've
today it's like
yeah,
99% saline or some sort of saline adjacent product.
right. So like I've heard clients tell me like, oh, I thought I would try this, and then they'll go on to describe something completely unhinged. But in terms of like piercer aftercare, I don't think I have like a wacky, crazy version that would be hugely different. So I think I'm going to pass that one. In fact, you know what? I'm going to Uno reverse it. I'm going to Uno reverse the question so that you have to tell me what's the wackiest aftercare that a piercer has given that you've heard.
Okay. Um, Preparation H.
Oh, I've heard that for tattoos. I have heard
Yeah.
tattooers give that advice.
No, for
Uh,
for this was specifically for piercing, and the client specifically ended up in the hospital. But I think the logic was like, if you put Preparation H on your bum, it will make your hemorrhoids come down because it's an antihistamine.
mhm.
Uh, Histamine is also part of your body's healing response. So if you put antihistamine on an actively healing wound, that can have a lot of negative impact to whether or not that wound can actually heal properly. And somebody learned the hard way that you shouldn't use Preparation H on your body piercing. So that's it. That one was pretty silly.
I think that reminds me of the famous Ewan McGregor line in Train Spotting where he says, "For all the good it did me, I might as well have stuck it up my arse."
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think most Scottish phrases involve the word arse. Okay, your turn for a question.
Oh, okay. All right. Question the second. What was the first professional piercing you ever did in a studio setting? And how would 2024 Ryan judge that performance? So, like, when I say a studio setting, I don't mean like piercing yourself at home, piercing a friend at home. I mean like in a professional studio on a paying customer, professional piercer Ryan. Can you remember the first thing that you did? And if you were watching you as like 2024 instructor Ryan, would you be horrified? Would you have notes? Like, what do you think you'd feel about it?
Uh, Prince Albert. Um, there was there was a studio in town, and I I knew the people who own the studio and their apprentices, and their piercing apprentice wasn't offering penile genital piercings. At the time, it was really relegated into like male female genital piercing kind of stuff, and it was like, dick piercings are done by a guy, hood piercings are done by a lady. Like that was the mentality around here. So
Mhm.
I was like a teenage kid. I was friends with some people that worked there. They knew that I was like a amateur piercer, like definitely not like licensed or anything. And they were like, "Would you like to be the one who comes in and performs the penis piercings?" And I was like, "Yep, absolutely. I'm totally ready." you know? And I think I was like just 18. And I do remember that at that time, tools were way more expensive than they are now, which is kind of why I was set on that path for like tools are precious, clean them and take care of them properly, and they'll last you a career or a lifetime and blah, blah, blah. The first receiving tube I ever invested in was really expensive, and it was like a 0 gauge receiving tube. So that was the only one I had. So when I showed up, it was like, you have to bring everything. So I bought a needle and jewelry out of a tattoo magazine. I had a receiving tube that I bought out of the back of a tattoo magazine. They had an autoclave, so I sterilized things there and then just pierced a complete stranger's genitals. And they had absolutely no idea who I was. This was before there was a piercing license in New Hampshire. So they could just be like, "Hey, kid, get over here and pierce this guy's dick." And I did.
And how do you think that so do you think if 2024 Ryan like watched the process that you would think, yeah, or would it be dramatically different?
In the scale of time, I think I was doing pretty okay for 1998, but
Yeah.
2024 standards, I'd be like, oh my God. But I remember it was probably like 10 gauge, probably a captive bead ring, probably steel. I was probably recommending Bactine for aftercare. All those things where now it would be like, what? But I mean, I was at least piercing into a receiving tube and using a body piercing needle that was put through an autoclave, and so was the jewelry and stuff. So it could have been worse.
Mhm.
And I think I had done worse before that point. So not the best, not the worst. All right. So is it my turn?
Yeah, it's your turn.
All right. And keep in mind, you've already skipped one, right? Or does that
Oh,
kind of that was your reverse card?
yeah, it was my reverse.
Reverse card. Okay. All right. Question. Was there a word, a piercing related word, that you mispronounced for way too long and you were embarrassed when you learned that it had been wrong the whole time?
Yes. So, what's the brand or the company that Brian does work for?
Psycan.
I read that as Skyscan.
Skyscan. Okay.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, it's Skyscan. Brian works for Skyscan. That
Science Canada.
Science Canada.
Skyscan.
I just read that as Skyscan, and I also, it's not piercing related, but that the game Skyrim.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was Sikrim.
Sick rim.
Sikrim. Yes, I can't
Okay.
read good. So yeah, Sky. I thought it's still Skyscan to me. Like like anytime I read it, I'm like Skyscan. So I would say I wasn't really saying that out loud very
Yeah.
much. It's not like it would come up very often, but that is definitely one where for years and years, I think until I heard you say Psycan, I was like, what the hell is that? You
Yeah.
mean Skyscan?
Skyscan. The company that makes Statum sterilizers.
Yeah,
And
Skyscan.
Optum.
So I
Good
would
little
say
good little company.
I would say Skyscan is probably like the biggest one or like the most common one in my head. Like I can't think of like a piercing or like a piece of jewelry that I've maybe like had a similar thing with. But yeah, the statins come from Skyscan.
Uh, bonus answer for me was perineum. I used to pronounce it as perennium, like it was like a perennial flower. I pronounced
What?
that wrong for a long time.
Can it not be both? Can it not be
Uh,
like I would say like perineum, I guess, but
yeah, perineum is the correct pronunciation,
just
but
say
we can
taint.
leave that one for
Just keep
another
it
episode.
simple, just to say taint.
Yeah, taint nothing.
Mhm.
Okay, your turn.
Okay. All right. If you weren't a piercer, what other job do you think you'd be good at today? Like not, what other career could you have had when you were a teenager, but I mean like right now today, if you could like switch to another career, what's something you think you'd be good at with your existing skill set you have?
So I really like the show The Bear, and I think if anybody watches the show The Bear, they're going to have daydreams about what their life would be like if they worked in a kitchen. Part of me thinks that it would be fun in a way to not be like the head chef, but to be like a support person in a kitchen, like a sous chef or like a line cook or something like that, and just like chop vegetables all day and like prepare stock and broth and like, do things like that. I think could be really satisfying. But I think as far as skill set, I think I'd probably be a pretty good butcher. I don't know. I
You
think I
know,
could probably like dissect animals really well. And I apologize for saying that for any vegan listeners.
so like bonus answer for me, I think I'd be a really good mortician. And like
Yeah.
not just a mortician, but like one of those morticians that does makeup on dead people.
Hmm.
Like I would just chat to the dead all day. I think I would do a lot better with the dead than the living. And like I think that there's definitely if you've made a living off of like, working with the body in the specific way that we do for such a long time, I think that you're just drawn to that, but without the customer service element. So I think I would quite like to be a beauty mortician.
I think the contrast now, if you come home at the end of a frustrating day and you're like, I'm frustrated by these piercing world circumstances or whatever, I think it would be interesting for you to come home at the end of the day and just complain about the frustrations of like, oh, I just couldn't get the right foundation tone for this one cadaver today, or I just couldn't do anything with their hair, or they had the worst eyebrows. I had to pluck their eyebrows all day. All right. Next question is mine, right?
Hmm.
Was there a class that was a big eye opener, like any sort of class along the way for you that was a big impact on your development as a piercer, slash, like, the instructor of that specific class?
There have been a few kind of like aha type moments for sure. I can't think of a particular piercing technique class. Like I do remember starting to learn about, bevel theory and starting to use blade needles and that kind of thing. Like I remember that stuff and I remember learning a lot, but I think one of the biggest career altering classes for me was more to do with like sales and marketing, like those kind of classes, and like learning about I think that it might have been a sales class that Bethra did. I think I'm not sure if she's ever done a sales class because this would have been a long like 8 years ago or something.
Like out
So
of
like
VMX or something?
I think it might have been maybe it was at UKPP, but have a feeling that it was Bethra because I can hear her talking about it. But it was like one of those classes. I also actually learned a lot the first time I went to her aftercare class as well. Like I learned a lot of specific things in that I remember. But with the sales stuff, it was about kind of like how your body language and your tone lets you down a lot, like more than your words sometimes. Like you can be saying all the right things, but if your body language and your tone is conveying that you don't think the person can afford this thing, and more than that, you don't even think it's worth the price because you're almost like apologizing for the price with your body language and your tone. And when you apologize for the price, what you're communicating is that you don't really think it's worth that much money. And then that communicates to the client that they shouldn't pay it because even you don't think that it's a good idea. So I think like learning about not just assuming that every client is gonna make a big sale, like not necessarily that, but giving them the opportunity to like see the piece and learn more about the piece without apologizing for it. Like a lot of us, particularly in the UK, we're trained to apologize for something that's inconvenient, like an expensive price. Like an expensive price is seen as an inconvenience. So it's like when someone says, how much is this? And you're like, that one's 300. And you kind of pull a bit of a face and the face is as if to say, oh, it's a lot. and it like automatically conveys that you didn't think that it was worth that much money and that it's really out there. Whereas
Mhm.
if you just tell them it's 300 and then give them some more information about the piece, that one's actually really nice. It's from this company, it's this material, these are the stones. Is there anything similar you'd like to look at? Do you want to see something else? And then they have the opportunity to buy it, but also they have the opportunity to redirect and ask about other pieces, or like give you more information about what they're looking for. So it's a hard thing to explain, and I don't think I'm doing a great job with it, but it's like learning how your tone and your face and your body language tells the customer that you think something is a waste of money, and that's what's making them not buy it. I think that had a huge impact on my ability to like sell jewelry to clients and like make them feel that it is worth the value that it has, which it is.
Yeah, classes that support piercers outside of holding a needle are always really important. And I think that today you have a really good mix of things like that, things that you do at the front counter, things that you do in the sterilization room, things that you do in the with the, in piercings and jewelry installs and stuff like that. But I do remember points in the industry where they were heavily leaning towards every class being like about techniques, or maybe like some science element of aftercare or metals or something like that. But I think that those classes are the ones that really help piercers have like long-term success in a career, because once you get to a point where you're proficient with performing the piercings, there's so many extra skills that you kind of have to learn if you want to take those steps up the ladder in your career, really.
Yeah, so like I guess learning how to be less apologetic about the stuff that I was selling was a huge influence on me, because you're the one that's selling it. You're meant to believe in it more than anyone. So if you're apologizing for it, it doesn't communicate a very positive message to your clients. So I would say that that's something that I still think about very often when I'm at work. So that's probably amongst the most impactful. Well, these two questions are kind of in tandem, so I'll maybe do them next. So for this one, I'll ask, if you could pierce any celebrity, who would you pierce and what would the piercing be?
For selfish reasons, if I was to choose any celebrity to pierce, it would be Henry Cavill, and anything where I could get close enough to him to just smell his hair, because I bet that he smells lovely. I bet that he smells like sandalwood or something warm, and I bet he smells lovely.
Or like some kind like vanilla. Like I think he would smell like some kind of like vanilla-y smell.
I don't think that he would, if there's a vanilla tone, I don't think that it would be like air quotes vanilla. I think it would be like, Moroccan spiced vanilla or
Yeah,
some
like
vanilla
not like
musk or
sweet
something.
vanilla, like a
Yeah.
more musky vanilla.
Yeah. And then maybe if I did a really good job, he could hold me in his big, strong arms after.
Hmm.
Anyway, my turn?
Yeah.
Okay. This is sort of a question, but I'm going to we're going to choose one or two or three, if it's funny, studio names by you just picking a random word out of three different columns. So there are six options in each column. So basically, column one, pick a number between one through six. Column two, pick a number between one through six. Same for column three, and that will be a studio name.
Okay, so right. Okay, go.
No, you go. You're supposed to tell me the number for the columns, and then I tell you what your shop name is.
Okay, four, two, one. What I get?
Crystal Monkey Factory.
Crystal Monkey Factory.
Crystal Monkey Factory.
Can I do one for you? But like, I don't want to see what the numbers are.
Yeah, just don't pick, 4, 2, 1. Pick some other combination.
Okay. 1, 6, 3.
Electric Anchor Parlor.
Okay, that definitely exists.
Yeah,
Like
that's a tattoo shop somewhere.
100%.
Do you want one more pick?
No.
Okay.
Why is
Another
there?
random option would have been Golden Diamond Collective.
That definitely exists or will
Yeah,
exist in the
yeah,
near future.
yeah. All right, I think it's your turn.
Okay. What is one client behavior you wish you could ban? Like
This is
one
a weird one.
specific.
This is a weird one, and I can't tell what the motivation is, and it might just be ego. I remember a time when people wanted to have all of their friends and family in the room with them when they got pierced. Like it was just this really exciting moment, and it wasn't necessarily just the person getting pierced needed all these extra people for support. It was because a bunch of people thought piercing was cool and they wanted to watch and they wanted to see and they were curious. So, I did have to make limits. In my studio, I draw the line at one client, one guest. So everybody can have one friend or relative or any adult can be in the room with them on the chair. They can watch whatever. And for a while, it was the same thing. Like I have to make people sit in the chair because the guest always wanted to like stand and get really close and watch, even if it wasn't for hand holding reasons. And it was because they were excited to see it. But now I find that like a lot of people that come in to watch, aside from parents are always probably a little bit more keen to watch for the safety element of their child kind of thing. But I think in more the category of like the boyfriend or like the friend, a lot of them are just on their phone the whole time. And it's kind of just like, I'm sorry, is this 30-second service not interesting enough for you? You have to check your Twitter or something like that. And it's not for like a piercing reason. It's just like they're bored instantly. So I think
Yeah.
that, like, I don't like people to do anything with their phone that involves flash or noise during a piercing. But I think I would also prefer people to just like, if you're going to be in the room, support the client, your friend, your
Yeah.
relative, your whatever, and don't just be bored on your phone.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't know. It might also just be that I want an audience because I'm vain. You're listening
You're
to the Piercing Wizard podcast. All right. So is it my question?
Mhm.
This is just a silly one. Um, if Ben and Jerry's named an ice cream flavor after you, what would you want them to call it?
Ben and Jerry's named an ice cream after me.
Yeah. Because I don't know if this question really reads for someone outside of the US, but Ben and Jerry's has like all these quirky ice cream names. Like they named one after Stephen Colbert and they called it Americone Dream. So like dumb stuff like that. Like they have like Cherry Garcia, stuff like that. I don't know. Is that not a good question for a UK person?
I'm just not sure what my ice cream name would be.
Yeah.
We can why don't we circle back to it?
Prickly pear.
Prickly pear. But
Prickly
that's a
pear.
type of cider, I think.
Oh, okay. Well, you can trademark it. Okay. I'll give you a pass on that one. Is there a piercing that has gone out of style that you'd want to bring back?
Yes. So
What?
I never thought I would say this, but tragus piercing.
Yeah?
When I started piercing, I honest to God, tragus piercings were the first piercings I was sick to death of. I remember thinking if I never see another tragus piercing again, it'll be too soon. Like I was doing at times 10 a day. Like and at the time I wasn't a freehand piercer like I am now. So I was using multiple tools. This was when I was a cannula piercer. So every tragus piercing was like a pair of hemostats, a pair of scissors, a pair of clamps. For every single 10 tragus piercings, that's 30 clamps that need processing. So like for every time somebody would come in, I would just my heart would sink a little bit and I'd be like, oh, not another one. They were so popular. They had a chokehold on every client that came in. And now I do like maybe one every 2 months, and that's it. And it's like now when I get one, I'm like, yeah, let's dust off the old tragus piercing skills. And now they're a lot simpler for me to do, and I don't need tools typically to do them. So it's like there's no like associated like hassle in my head at all of doing them. And it's like now I want to do them and nobody's asking for them. So like I would be quite happy if tragus piercings came back and I was doing them every day again. I think that I would quite like that.
Well, that's adorable.
Yeah.
Was there any cultural reason why you had so many that you had like a spike? Was it like a
I think
something a
that pop
celebrity had?
I think the pop stars just started getting them, and then it was
Yeah.
like the one that you could get other than the helix, you know? Like people would have their lobes and helix piercings, and then the tragus was like, there's always one. Like remember for a long time it was the forward helix, and for a long time it was the doth, and it was like for a while, it was just tragus piercings. Like I couldn't go a day without doing multiple tragus piercings. Um, so I think that, and also like the options now, there are so many more options for jewelry that I've never, back then I was just putting plain balls on everything. So like, I think that I would like to do more tragus piercings. They've gone out of style, but they can't go out of style in my heart, Ryan.
Mhm. I now I teach and I promote this method where I pierce a tragus from the back to the front with like a special curved needle, blah blah blah. But when I started doing them, first one I ever did before the professional dick piercing story, I pierced my friend Andrew, who has gone on to become like a really accomplished tattooer in the Philadelphia area. I pierced his tragus in his basement black metal bedroom in his parents' house, and I tried to use a cork behind it and pierce into the cork that I bought at a hardware store, and pierced through his tragus into the cork. The cork split in half, and I jabbed him right in the conch. Um, and that was the reason why I bought my really expensive zero gauge receiving tube because of that first tragus piercing.
Um, so question, and this is like the two-parter from the one that you just got. What is one piercer behavior that you wish you could throw in the bin? So client behavior, you said you're tired of people being on their phones and not being supportive of their friends. So what's one like piercer behavior that you would chuck in the bin?
I might let you skip this one if I say the wrong thing, but my first gut instinct is honestly just like the shift in Piercer online presence from I'm trying to share what I'm doing in my studio because I would like you to come into my studio. The shift of that to just like talking to the void on like TikTok kind of a thing, like making clips where you're just talking about Piercer stuff to no one specific and probably no one that's ever going to like frequent your business. That's what probably makes me feel like we're kind of being counterproductive sometimes online, taking it away from trying to connect to a person that might want to get a piercing from you. And not to say that everything should be for money, but I think that some of the stuff that people do, they try to sensationalize just so that somebody will pay attention rather than genuinely trying to like educate or share beneficial information. Sometimes it comes across as almost like cringe factor in a way.
Mhm.
Yeah. Was that okay? Or is that
Yeah,
am I
no,
gonna
I mean, I said something similar a couple of weeks ago about how your content should draw clients into the studio. Your clients shouldn't just generate content. Like if every time I went and got my nails done or got waxed or something, they were like, "Can we take a picture of this?" I would be like, "No,
yeah.
leave me
Yeah.
alone."
Pictures
So
for
it's
me
like,
used to just be like, this is a really interesting thing that I don't usually
yeah.
get to do or that I feel like I kind of specialize in a way. And it's not just like, let me take a picture just so I can get something up for the algorithm and
So like your piercer trait you would chuck in the bin is like being a little bit too exploitative with
I didn't
content
use the word
directly.
exploitative. I didn't,
Well,
it's
not
not so much
exploitative.
exploiting clients, it's just that it's just talking about nothing for the sake of
Yeah.
talking to people who don't really care and they're just going to hit a like button and continue on with their day. Like there's zero connection to any of it. And
Right.
like that's I just don't want it to get to this diluted thing now.
That's really interesting, Ryan. And if people want to learn more from you, is there a place that they can do that?
You know, it's funny, Lola. You can like and subscribe to my content at patreon.com/RyanPBA. And I realize that I'm a complete hypocrite when I say things like that, but I feel like I'm doing it at least for education to a specific captive audience that wants that information. And it's not just like
It's not just screaming into
commentary.
the void.
It's not just commentary. It's,
Yeah.
whatever. But I totally get it. Yes, I am an egomaniac. That's no surprise. I'm not hiding it. This is my last question for you. Okay.
Right.
Can you think of a simple piercing that you unnecessarily overcomplicated earlier in your career? Like, you talked about the tragus thing, needing three tools for something like that. Is there anything that you would look back on now that would kind of be in that category of like, I can't believe I used all those different things all the time?
Oh, okay. So this was overcomplicated, but like there was a reason that it was overcomplicated. So there was a logic to it. But I'm gonna say nape piercing.
Okay. What was your method?
Um, well, so this was before I was using, what do you call it? Blade needles. This was when, so I was doing, I think at this point I was using cannulas, but I would do punch and taper nape piercings. So, like, for those that aren't familiar, to create the staple shape of a surface piercing, I would do a dermal punch or biopsy punch straight down on both of my holes, like entrance and exit holes. And then I would lower a taper into one of the holes and just kind of like wiggle it along, separating the tissue and feeling that lovely feeling you get when you're doing that really weird thing and pop it out the other side. At
That
this
that
point,
sensation to a piercer is equal to like when you're wrapping Christmas presents and you're trying to cut the wrapping paper and the scissors just glide through the paper and you're like shh, like it's that satisfying as a piercer.
so, but at this point in my career, I didn't have threaded tapers that were compatible with the staple bar. Like I can't remember what the mismatch was, but at this point you couldn't buy that size in the UK. Like you couldn't get, I guess, 14 gauge tapers for internally threaded jewelry or something at that point in time. It just wasn't available. All I had were 16 gauge. So like I would take a 16 gauge concave taper, work that through, and then I would take the plastic tubing off a cannula, like a little cannula, and you would slide it onto the narrow end of the taper and you would push them together until the plastic stretched so thin there wasn't a ridge that you could feel. And then you could just slide it back through, get rid of the taper. Now you have a cannula in there. But that cannula, the plastic tubing of a cannula, but that tubing's not big enough. So you get the next bit of tubing from another needle. So now I've wasted two whole needles that I didn't use for a piercing. And cannulas aren't cheap, or at least weren't at the time. Like they're more expensive than people think. So because they have that lovely tapered edge, you would then slide that onto the other tubing, push it down till, until it stretches. And I would sometimes do that a couple of times to get the size bigger and bigger until it was big enough that I could get the staple shape all the way inside a cannula, and then I would pull everything through. And it's like, and it would be, the person would be fine, like would be fine. There'd be no bleeding, there'd be no stress. It was always really gentle because good quality cannulas are very, very thin. So it's like you don't get a ridge or a bump. And I'm not defending that technique, but some of these connections with blanks at the minute are looking a little lumpy bumpy. So maybe just look at yourself, look inward before judging me. I've seen things on the internet. So yeah, I would say the nape piercing with like the biopsy punches and the taper and then the multiple cannula tubing. I mean, it turned out fine, but I went to Luis Garcia's surface piercing class and then I just learned to do wound shaping with one blade needle and it just saved me so much faffing and so much effort. And I remember doing it the first time and being like, well, I guess that's okay. Just did them like that. And I was like, yeah, this is fine. This is completely fine. But like I would say that's the most weird, complicated thing that I would do. I was adapting and overcoming, Ryan, is the
You
main
did
thing
it. You
away
did it.
here. Hmm.
All I would do before I understood wound shaping is I would just upsize the needle so I could just stick the end of the surface bar completely in the needle, and it would just be such a bloody mess.
Hmm.
Um, I want to tell just the quick thing about what I used to do for surface anchors because compared to what I do now, it was ridiculous. I would uh, pinch up the skin, pierce with an O needle, release the skin. Then I would take a pair of skin tweezers and I would pull out the skin plug. And then I would take a taper and I would go into the hole and I would manually open a pocket with the taper. And
Mm-hmm.
then it was before the microdermal tools from Anatometal existed. So I had to take no teeth hemostats and cut notches into them so I could lock them onto an end piece. And then I would slide in the toe end of the base, but then I would use a microsurgical skin hook to pull the skin around the heel. So it was like 5 tools to put in a surface anchor. And like just compared to how I do it now, start to finish, like 5 seconds, compared to like this ridiculous mess of all these tools, it kind of hilarious in retrospect.
So, last question for you that I absolutely haven't just thought up off the top of my head because
Okay.
I
Because you're a
miscounted.
professional.
Yes. So in that vein, um, you mentioned earlier about like buying cork and piercing into cork and that kind of thing. Are there any examples you can think of early in your career, pre-judgment, where you bought a tool that wasn't specifically for piercing, but you used it for piercing purposes? Like, getting the cork from a hardware store. Was there like something where you were like, I can use this, and then like used it for a work purpose?
I mean, yes. I can tell a few different things, but the big thing is like at the time in like the mid to late 90s, just being like a random kid in New Hampshire with no access to anything other than like tattoo magazines and ads in the back of them. I would go to like this store called Workin' Gear, whereas it's where you would buy like Dickies or like scrubs if you were like a nurse or something, and they would have hemostats. So I'd buy hemostats for like $10 each at Workin' Gear. But I remember the first tongue I ever pierced. Sometimes like the reason I don't let people take videos, like civilians, like friends, the guests, the reason I don't like them taking videos during a piercing is because I can't control the information. And sometimes like they would take that and then try to emulate what I'm doing in a
Mm,
way, like copy it based on the video. And I
yeah.
know that because when I was a teenager, that's what I did, because I would buy VHS tapes from like tattoo conventions and all kinds of stuff like that. And it would show body piercing, but I'd be like, I don't know what that tool is, but it kind of looks like hot dog tongs. So why don't I just try to pierce a tongue with some hot dog tongs, which I totally did. I I totally before I had an autoclave, which to my credit I at least had, around that 1998 time period. I bought a pressure cooker and I tried to air quotes sterilize some stuff in a pressure cooker, like a stovetop pressure cooker that was meant for like cooking vegetables and potatoes.
So,
Um,
so you did a tongue piercing.
I did a tongue piercing. Yeah,
Hmm.
that's yeah. But yeah, I did, like, I'll admit it, because like it's 30 years ago, nearly. Um, but yeah, I did some ridiculous things in the mid 90s. Like 1996, 1997 was a year of a lot of teenage mistakes for me. Well, I think that might be all of our questions.
Hmm.
I like this concept. We could maybe do one again someday. We were struggling to come up with an episode. I wanted to publish something before the UK APP conference. Hopefully, we'll record some stuff while we're there. And we're doing a live podcast also at this year's UK APP conference. We're going to invite Helen Houghton or Houghton?
I say Houghton. So
Houghton,
like, so
Houghton,
this could be one of those things that we've both been mispronouncing.
like
Like
Perennium,
we can ask Brian from Skyscan
Skyscan, how he pronounces Helen
and Perineum.
Houghton's last name from Holier Than Thou in Manchester. That's
I
how
would
I
say
think of certain
Houghton.
people. Sorry,
Like I would say Houghton if it was me.
Houghton.
Like looking at that word, that's what I would say. But I've
Okay.
never had to first and last name Helen. Like that would be way too formal for
Yeah.
most of the. I'd just be like, "Hi, Helen,"
Her
like
Royal Highness Helen Houghton
of holier than thou.
of Holier Than Thou, Manchester,
Mm.
and Jason D'Souza, whose name I know how to pronounce because it's got the little apostrophes and it makes it so easy to like pronounce phonetically. So it's Jason D'Souza will be our guests for our live Piercing Wizard podcast at the UK APP conference. So I'm looking forward to that quite a bit.
Do they know?
They do. I've invited both of them.
They're
We're
not
still
just
kind of
finding out.
dialing in the subject matter, but Helen had some good ideas, and I think it'll be a fun little episode. Is there anything else that you wanted to mention?
No, I think I've said enough.
Okay. Well, if you didn't like this episode, this was all Lola's idea.
You know what? I'm actually reviewing, like I review all of my classes at least annually if I don't, especially if I don't have anything new that I'm teaching. So I've been reviewing my Prince Albert class because I'm doing that at UKPP, and this is the first time that I'm not doing it with the predicting and preventing predatory behavior supplement. Like I've always done them combined. And the reason I'm no longer including it is because it's freely available online now to watch. So it's like I don't want to waste class time by showing something. So I'm going to include like information on where you can view it in the class, but that's going to leave me with like at least 20 minutes to fill. So I've come up with some extra material for the PA class, and I thought we could also take a look at some reverse PA bonus pictures and information. I mean, it's a completely different piercing, so it's not like a full class, but I just thought it would be fun to throw in for people that don't really know a lot about reverse PAs, just for fun.
Just some lovely bonus material.
Bonus material. That's
Bonus
great.
material. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Well, thanks for listening.
I want to know that Ryan edits all of these podcasts, so if that stays in, he's chosen to leave that in.
Yeah.
Specifically, it made the cut.
Decision. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for listening to yet another episode of the Piercing Wizard podcast, and we'll be back when we have something else to put out.
Bye.
For more information about the show, visit piercingwizardpodcast.com or like Piercing Wizard Podcast on Facebook. For more info about your host, visit precisionbodyarts.com or search Ryan PBA on Facebook, Instagram, and Tumblr. If you enjoy the show, you can subscribe on iTunes, Apple Podcast, and Google Play. Music by Benny B. Blanco. Show copyright 2017, Precision Body Arts LLC, all rights reserved.